Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Man-Bat. I don't think it's from a specific version. Maybe it's Rebirth? Yeah, it's Rebirth. But, I mean, it's Man-Bat. They mostly always look the same, sort of. And this is one of their big ones, and it's one that a lot of people told me was really good, and that I should review it. And to them I said, okay, but secretly, I was gonna get it anyway to review it, because it's a Batman character and it looked decent. So that's what we're gonna do. As you might have guessed, thanks to the unceremonious tumble it just took, it has some problems. So let's go ahead and get it off the stand and take a closer look. Alright, this guy tries to stand at just about 8.5 inches plus a little bit. That's going to make him about 21 centimeters, not counting anything that sticks up above the cranium. So that's a good enough size scaling. I didn't think to grab another DC figure, but here's a Mr. Sinister. He's about 7 inches tall. So there you go. So there's your rough McFarlane scale comparison. Okay, so question of the day. Are you guys sick of figures that can't stand on their own? Not really, that's not the question of the day. Obviously, you wouldn't like that. Question of the day. Are you guys sick of everything being related to Batman? I'm going to ask it again because we've continued down that path. For me, it's fine. I like Batman more than Superman by a lot, and more than all the other DC characters by a lot, so I'm okay with it. Alright. This guy, what a conundrum, huh? They put so much effort into this. There's so much good about it. And I'm going to talk about the good too, don't worry. But there's so much wrong with it that it's like, is it worth buying still? That's the question. And I'm not just saying that at the beginning of the review to keep you watching. That's the actual predicament we have here. Is all the good stuff enough? Alright, so let's talk about the sculpt. I love the sculpted fur around here. That looks very nice. It's very detailed compared to what you normally see on figures like this, so I like that a whole bunch. It's down on the arms and hands a little bit too. The main body has like a scaly texture, not scales like a lizard, but like rough skin texture and a lot of veins and musculature, and it looks really, really good. I like the sculpt a whole bunch. It's very nice. The legs of the pants are sculpted very nice with texture and tears. The crotch piece does not have any texture on it, which is weird. I mean, it does technically, but just barely, so it doesn't match. So that's a problem. Also, the painted pants look really nice down here, though they're kind of glossy. The matte pants up here are a different color. These are just molded in plastic. These are painted. That doesn't look good. I like that they painted the claws on the feet. The feet are sculpted well. The wings have little veins and things in them. That's nice. The wings are almost a matte finish, whereas the rest of him's kind of shiny. I don't care for that, but you can like shiny if you want to for him. He's generally sculpted really well. The muscles are a little weird. There's a big lump back here where it shouldn't be, like it's going over the spine. It's completely weird, but whatever. We'll do a cake rating right now. He's got some junk in the trunk. I can only say some though, because he's hunched, so it's a little hard to say. I'll give him a 7 though. It looks thick. Like normally when you lean over like that, you wouldn't see as much girth. And he's got some, like his pants are tight back there, so he's gonna get that rating. I wonder if people are ever going to just understand what that is, or if it's always going to be weird to some person who hasn't seen a McFarlane review from me before, and they're like, why is he rating the ass? Oh well. Anyway, let's talk about the head. I was at first very pleased with it, because there's a lot of sculpt work going on. I think they kind of overplayed their hand with the pink ear things. I get what they're going for there, but it's awfully dark and shiny, and it doesn't quite look like an organic thing. But I like all the detail work, except for the teeth, because he has these super asymmetric teeth, which is okay, except he's got the one giant snaggle tooth on his right, our left. This giant fang is so much bigger than all the other teeth. Hopefully you guys can tell what's going on there. It looks weird. I would like to redo the teeth on that guy to just give him sharp teeth. We don't need giant fangs that look like stakes of wooden stakes hanging out of his mouth, but stakes of wood, whatever. Overall, it's sculpted well. So yeah, I like the aesthetic generally speaking. Obviously, the crotch not matching is a problem, but overall, it looks pretty good. So aside from the gloss, because the glossiness is a problem-ish, and the pants not matching is definitely a problem, it still looks really good. I'll give it an 8 for the aesthetic. It looks nice. Now, as far as accessories go, we do have this Trading card. We're back to comic art. I don't know how that happened, but it doesn't match the character at all. This one has green torn pants, an entirely different look. None of the fur, different head, totally different look. So that's a thing. And then we also get the stand for helping the figure stand, which is ironic because this figure cannot, and the stand does not help. So, 0 out of 10 for accessories. Okay, now well, I guess I should talk about it in the accessory section, huh? Let's do that. I want to point something out here. What do you see? What do you see sticking off the end of his arm right there? It's fingers. He's got fingers sticking off the ends of his arms. On this guy, I don't know if he has fingers, because his hands are in a permanent fist shape that's super weird, and his pinky just goes right into here. Now, I know if he was a regular bat, that would make sense, but this isn't. Is there a version of him where he only has 2 to 3 fingers that are useful? I don't know. Either way, we have no claw hand for either side, no accessory, no built-on, nothing. He just has these weird mangled fist hands that are permanently part of him. So that's super disappointing. This whole region in here is really weird looking too, by the way, but you probably won't see that too much. Okay, on to the articulation. It seems to me like there's a big barbell in here, a ball peg up here and one in the neck, and this is just a floating piece, and this works really well. He can move his head up and down pretty nicely. I like that. It does go side to side. I like that a lot. Leaning it to the side looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously, you can rotate it, move it around a little bit too, like that. Shoulders work really nicely because there's a little bit of play in there. Connected on that ball peg without a cap this time because of the fur. That's okay. Unlike the Titan Joker, he can hold his arms up. I don't have any problem with this guy. It's more loose than I feel comfortable with, but it does work, so that's okay. No issue there. No bicep swivel. We get a single jointed elbow that only gives you about 90 degrees, so pretty limited there, and that is where you get your bicep swivel also, which you're not going to probably do too much with because his wing is connected back here and over here, so now you have a big gap. But you do get that, I guess, and no wrist articulation because he has no wrists. It's all just one big sculpt. Okay. Definitely wish the shoulders had a little bit more gusto in them. They're a little bit loose. Now, he does have a double ball peg in here for the torso, and he can lean forward very nicely. Leaning back, you don't get any back. There's no back. To the side, that's pretty good, and of course you get some rotation. That's fine. There's a single ball peg down here, and that one works even more. He can lean over very far at the waist, which is wonderful. We don't normally get that. Leaning back, it's very limited, and you get this big gap, but you can kind of mush his crotch back in, but because there's a hard skeleton inside his crotch, it's just too hard to mush it. So that's what she said, and you're gonna end up with a gap right there. So just don't lean him all the way back. You know, you kind of have to lean him back a little bit for some poses. You should be okay. Now it's very loose in here. I'd like to note this top one, super loose. So that's kind of a bummer. Now the hips, speaking of loose, these things might as well not even be connected. Like they are there, but just barely. He has really good range. Technically, the diaper flexes. Going forward even works pretty well, but they're so loose. Funny enough, they're not the loose part of the figure. They're loose, but they're not the worst part. We'll get to that. Let's talk about the knees. Double jointed knees have good range, but holy crap, what'd they do? Articulation lesson coming up right now. Don't do this. Don't sculpt a whole bunch of meat on top of the disc that makes up the hinge. Don't do that, because then you end up with these weird cutouts that you don't need. The reason they have these giant cutouts is because the joint is not the full diameter of the end of the limb. The joint is only this big. It's only as big as, well, you can see. You can see there. You can see how far the joint is and then how much more leg there is on top of it. If the joint went all the way up, you wouldn't have any need for all of this. There's no reason for that. The joint is like half the thickness of the leg. So the joint cuts out like right here. And that's why you have those weird cutouts. So if you bend the knees, they look terrible. If you don't bend the knees, they still look weird because of the way they did that with that like double crescent shape. Don't get that. But they could have easily avoided that. Just make the joint bigger. The disc part on each end. Make that bigger. Okay, for the ankles, we have these sculpted ball hinges again. They're so floppy. They have good range. They rotate. Obviously, you get your ankle rocker. You get everything you want out of the joint, but it's so floppy, and he's so top heavy. It's ridiculous. I'll show you how floppy he is in a second, but let's look at the toe joint. First, I'd like to just point out where the toes are. You see the toes from the bottom? Okay, so those are the toes, and the knuckles will be along the meaty part. So the main knuckle, where you bend your main toe bend, is right up here. Right by the toes, surprisingly. They put the joint all the way back in the middle of the metatarsals, which is right in the middle of the foot. So when you bend the foot, it's ridiculous. Like you can see where his toes are, but the joint is somewhere in the middle of the long bones. So that makes no sense. That's ridiculous. Okay, so as far as flop goes, it's ridiculously hard for him to stand. If you balance him just right, it'll work, but his ankles can't hold the weight. So you have to basically get him to stand in a pose where his ankles don't bear any weight any more than they have to, and his legs do that. And then when they do that, the ankles give. I'll bend it down so you can see. This is his own weight doing this, by the way. I'm not doing that. Every time, like, you have to find just the right spot to balance him so that his hips don't spread out, or if they do, they don't make the ankles bend. But the ankles go limp every time when there's any force applied to them, and the hips like to kick out. And he can also lean back too far because the ankles don't hold him that way, and then this joint is too loose. So this thing is a freaking nightmare to pose. And guess what this does? Guess what? Let me put it on and show you how much that helps. Oh, that's right, it doesn't make a difference because the joints don't work. If the hips... We found a spot. If the hips, it's not because of the disc. If the hips and the ankles and the torso are also floppy, see, look, the disc makes no difference. So articulation on this guy, 3 out of 10. The torso is really good. The neck's really good. The torso is pretty good. The neck's really good. But the rest of the figure is just jacked as far as articulation goes. Not good. Now, time for a final verdict. Me personally, I still really like this figure. And if I wanted to repaint it, which I tend to not do, it would look wonderful. These loose joints, these are the kind of loose joints down here that you can't do much about, the ankles specifically. The hips too, the way they're made. So if you can get like a little stand in there to like actually grip him by the ass or something to hold him up, then you might be able to get a pose out of him and keep him on a shelf. But because of the loose ankles, if your ankles are loose, you just can't pose the figure because that's the only thing supporting him. Like, that's the one joint that needs to be tight no matter what. I mean, I guess the other parts of the legs are pretty important too, but the ankles are super important, so that's not cool. So I'm going to give it a final verdict of only 7 out of 10. If you can find one with tight joints, then it's pretty good. Like, it definitely has a few problems, but it's cool. But the overall sculpt is by far the best thing. They sculpted it like mad. It looks wonderful, other than that snaggletooth. But the loose joints are a deal breaker. Paints are okay. Accessories are non-existent. But the sculpt is wonderful. I wanted to like this so much more, but the fact that it can barely stand unless I'm super lucky, and even then probably not, that kind of blows. So, oh well, yeah. There you go, guys. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, you can give it a thumbs down. And if you haven't subscribed, you might want to. I have new videos every day but Wednesday, and thousands already on the channel. So make sure you come back for all of that. And in the meantime, keep collecting.